So we were dealing with a little bit of technical difficulties, but we are here and we're hoping that the technological gods are on our side tonight. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Let's Debate podcast powered by Delahanty Media. I'm your co-host, Nick Delahanty. Kyle, it's been an adventurous 20 minutes for us. How's it going?
It's going well. It has been, but hopefully, like you said, the technological gods are on our side for at least the next hour. But with that being said, welcome everyone. Welcome back to the Let's Debate podcast. You know the deal. If you haven't checked out our previous episodes, head over to our website. Nick, do you want to jump into that before we really get started?
Yeah, sure. So, as we've mentioned on our shows before, we have our Delahanty Media website, and you noticed that we had that really, I don't want to even call it ugly, but it was really didn't stand out type of domain name. But now we have our domain name. It's officially set, DelahantyMedia.com. If you go to our website, it is loaded. There is so much for you to check out on our site. You can check out all our episodes are loaded on there, the audio side. You can check out our latest episode on the video side of things. Also, the Pinstripe Talk podcast, you name it, everything is on there for you. Makes life a lot easier for you guys to check out our content. So go out there, check it out, and check out the website while you're at it. I think we've done a really nice job of putting it together, so I think you guys should check it out. And go to the store while you're at it. The store is located around the homepage. So I think we're making life a lot easier for them, Kyle.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Like Nick said, if you want to check out our previous episodes, if you want to listen to the audio side of it on podcasts, you can head over to DelahantyMedia.com. With that, head over to our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Let's Debate Podcast, Instagram at Delahanty Media, and Twitter at Let's Debate Pod. And then also, like Nick said, head over to the shop. Got some nice products in there. You got T-shirts, long sleeves, sweatshirts, anything you want, you name it. So with that being said, I'll throw it back over to Nick. We can get today's episode started.
We really have a lot to talk about today, and I'm excited for this one because when we decided what we wanted to talk about, there was just so much to choose from. And as you can see on the side of our screen, our topics for tonight's show are listed there. If you're listening on the audio side, you're just going to have to follow along with us. But something came up today that was really interesting to both myself and Kyle, and we're going to start with the NFL. Two big-name tight ends get big extensions. Let's start with George Kittle, shall we? 5 years, $75 million. More than half of that money is guaranteed. He will get $40 million of that guaranteed, 30 of which he received today. And now, if you're wondering, how come a tight end's getting so much money? Well, it's simple. In his first 3 years, he has the most reception yards, 2,945, and catches through 3 seasons in the pros. And he also broke the record for most receiving yards by a tight end in one single season. And then you look at Travis Kelce, 4 years, $57 million. He's tied to Kansas City for the next 6 years. He had $28 million guaranteed. We know how big of a piece he is for Patrick Mahomes. Kyle, what's your take on the two deals?
My initial thought on the entire day was it was kind of strange how two of the best tight ends in the league got paid on the same day. We were talking about it earlier. We felt it was, well, if San Francisco was going to pay Kittle, then Kansas City said, well, we got to pay our guy. So they did so. But, look, they're both deserving of their money. When you talk about the top tight ends in the league, it's Kittle, Kelce, and then Ertz. And I'm sure Ertz is going to get his money fairly soon, especially with these two getting paid. And I think they're two major pieces to the puzzle. Both these guys played in the Super Bowl last year. Kittle's Jimmy G's best friend on the field and probably off the field, too, the way they act together. And then Kelce and Mahomes are one of the best duos in the league. You can make a case that Kelce's, Mahomes' best target. You could throw in Tyreek Hill as well. But overall, they're two of the best tight ends in the league. They deserve to be paid. And I think what this leads to is to see how much Ertz gets paid. I know you mentioned before that Kelce and Kittle are 1A, and we think Ertz is 1B. So he might not get as much, but we know how the free agency market runs. And the next guy up usually gets paid the most. So we'll see how that plays out.
Oh, without a doubt. And you mentioned a good point about how much they mean to their organizations, and not only the organization, but the quarterbacks. They matched up in the Super Bowl last year. We know how big Kittle is to Garoppolo. They're very close. But also Travis Kelce to Patrick Mahomes. You can name all the weapons Kansas City has. But Kelce is a very valuable piece of that offense. Personally, looking at this, I think that Kansas City got a better deal in terms of value because Kelsey, I think, could have gotten a little more money than he did, considering what Kittle was able to bring in. Good for Kittle, man. He's had a good 3 years in the pros. He really deserved the extension, and now it's going to be a case of what does Zach Ertz get? Do you think that Ertz could surpass what Kelsey gets, or do you see him getting a little bit lower of value?
I think Ertz may pass Kelsey based on the fact that I think Kelsey got a little bit less than maybe he deserves because of the contract that Patrick Mahomes just signed. They need to be somewhat smart with their money. I know they paid Chris Jones as well, so they've been throwing out these big contracts. I don't know where they're finding the money. I have no idea. The NFL should probably look into that. But Ertz deserves his money, and I think he's a huge piece to that team. Whether Wentz is the quarterback of the future or not for them, I don't really see the Eagles having a ton of massive contracts. So they could afford to pay a guy like Ertz, and I think they're going to do it because he's been one of the steady guys. He was a huge piece to their Super Bowl championship a few years ago. He's been a huge piece to both their playoff runs the past few years. So another guy deserving of his money. And as I mentioned previously, the next guy up in free agency, if you're that big of a star, you're most likely going to pass up the guy who was just paid. It's just how it goes.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here just a little bit. Give me a year and a number for Zach Ertz. Mind you, he has 2 years left on his contract with the Eagles now, so he's around the same as the likes of Kelsey and Kittle are.
Well, I think a big piece of that is how old he is. We know he's not too old. I believe he's in his prime. But I'm going to probably say I'm taking a look at the contracts of Kittle and Kelsey right now.
Do you want the Ertz age now, or do you want it without the age? Because I could give you his age.
Yeah, give me his age.
He's 29.
All right, so I'm going to say I'll go 5 years. No, I'll go 4 years. 4 years, about $68 million. Maybe $69 million, right around there. I think he's right below Kittle, but he surpasses Kelsey. Like I said, not because I think Ertz may be better than Kelsey, but because I think Philadelphia could afford it.
Wow, I'm sitting here thinking on my end of it. I'm trying to go by how I rate him, but I like that take. I like how you thought about that. I would go more toward the 4 years, kind of $60 million, and give him $30 million guaranteed. Give him that incentive. Yeah, you have more guaranteed money than Kelsey, but still, don't break the bank for your star tight end and try to keep the finances kind of lower. Ertz is a great tight end. All three of these guys are great, and they make a big difference in their team's offense. And if you could keep them around, then that's a good thing that you're able to do as an organization. But now that we talked about the NFL tight ends, there is a question about whether NFL teams are going to be able to scout the next great talent out of college, because over the past week, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have announced that they have canceled their fall seasons. And with the coronavirus, we've talked about it on probably every show we've done so far. It's a big thing. We're in a predicament where the schools are now forced to have to make a decision as to whether or not they're going to continue with their season. Now, the NCAA, we know we have some statements from the Big Ten and the Pac-12 that I just put on the screen. And as we kind of talk about it, I want to get your take on them canceling the season, and what's your thinking about the rest of the Power 5 schools, how they've been kind of hesitant to cancel so far?
Right, so that's two of the Power 5 conferences right now. Like Nick mentioned, the Big Ten and the Pac-12. I'm not shocked that they're postponing the season and they're looking to play in the spring, just mainly based on what's going on right now. The pros are having their season, but some of them are having difficulty doing so. The MLB has certain teams whose seasons are suspended. These aren't professional athletes. These are student athletes. So I'm not shocked by it. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with the Big 12, the SEC, or the ACC. I know the ACC and the SEC have come out. I mean, they haven't come out yet at all. The Big 12 is looking to play. Their commissioner came out fairly recently and said that their players, their coaches, their schools want to have a season. And now it's up to the conference as a whole to create a safe, medically secure structure for, environment pretty much for these students and athletes to be in. and they want to go forward with that. I know in the ACC, you have a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence. He's been very vocal about wanting to play, and I'm sure that's because he probably wants to win another national championship. He probably wants to raise his draft stock. And then one of the schools, Michigan, which is in the Big Ten, which will not be playing this fall, their coach, Jim Harbaugh, came out and he said, based on the facts that they've accumulated since the athletes got back on campus June 13th, he said that he thinks they could find a way around it and not test positive for COVID and have a successful season. So once again, it's something where only time's going to tell how it's going to go, but we do know two conferences won't be playing this fall.
And it's crazy to think that there's so much uncertainty and so much not a lot of clarity in terms of these situations that we're dealing with, because some say it's safe, some say it's not, and there's no middle ground as to what's going to happen. The NCAA really has dropped the ball, in my opinion, on this, because if you're sitting there and you have two of your conferences cancel, wouldn't you think it's more logical to cancel all of them together and kind of work together in terms of trying to find a solution to this? And the other thing that really stands out to me is the amount of money that these schools are losing. I think that's a driving force to why they want to play. You know, if you look at the Power 5 schools, they're losing about $75 million apiece during these seasons that they're losing. And the same way that it impacts the schools and the universities, it impacts the players too. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence. You know, he might still be the number one pick in the draft come next year. There's a very good chance of that. But why not have a chance to play in what could be his final year? And let's remember, and I listened to it the other day, and I was surprised by it, but again, it was something that just doesn't cross your mind. Joe Burrow went into last season as a graded 5th-round draft pick. He was the number one overall pick. So there's a lot on the line for these guys, and you see some of these players like a Justin Fields, some guys who may not be the big star right now, but they're trying to make a name for themselves, and this might be their last chance of doing so. So it's a sticky situation, but I just feel like they need clarity whether we're going to move it to the spring or we're not going to do it at all. Because I don't know how you can get around with allowing the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 to go, but the Big 10 and the Pac-12 decide, you know, we're just going to sit this one out.
Yeah, it's strange. It's not just the matter of a season being suspended for a few months. This affects the NFL as well. It affects their entire draft process. Is the NFL draft still going to be in April when the college football season may be going on during April, considering that's a spring month and it's going to be spring football? How does that go in? Like, does that push back the NFL draft, which pushes back the NFL season a little bit? And that's something that's going on with all the sports. You know, they're playing at a time where they're not used to playing. So it's throwing off everything. How do you start the next season? Is the NBA going to start at the right time? No, because they're pushed back to December, right? So this is going to affect a lot. It's going to go into next season. And you made a good point. Joe Burrow was pretty much a nobody at the beginning of last season. Yeah, you might have heard his name once in a while, but you didn't expect national champion, Heisman winner, first pick in the draft. So by not playing or maybe postponing a season, you're taking opportunities away from guys who could be the next Joe Burrow. And you're also taking opportunities away from those guys who are right on the brink of possibly being a first rounder or being drafted. And now their season's going to be pushed back, or they might not have a season at all. They may not make the pros. And we talked about it in one of our previous episodes around the NFL draft. This was going to be a weird year. The 2020 was going to be a weird NFL draft because they were able to see these players play, but they weren't able to do pre-draft visits, interviews, workouts. So you were basically doing this through FaceTime like we are, and you're watching tape on their seasons. What if there is no tape? Or what if there's not enough time? There's a very small gap between the draft and actually seeing these guys play out their season. So there's a lot that goes into it. They need to, like you said, they need to figure something out, because it's going to be weird watching one conference play in the fall, and that's all the football we get. Just this one conference, a few games a week. Like, it just, what is it, the XFL? It makes no sense.
And then how do you turn around and say that you could have a college football playoff if not everybody's in it? You know, they said today that they're canceling fall championships but the FBS, so I don't know how that pertains to the college football system, but logically, think of the two options. You can either A, cancel fully in the fall and say, you know what, We're going to push into the spring. We're going to let these guys hopefully compete maybe March, April, May. Tell the NFL, move your draft back. It is what it is. And at that point, risk guys not playing in bowl games and things like that if you even have them. Or you could tell these schools, hey, you know what? You're ready to play. Your conference is ready to rock and roll. You want to play your conference schedule? Cool. That's fine. But that's all you're getting this year. You're not getting a playoff game. You're not getting fans. You're not getting all the perks of it. So there are two ways to look at it, I think. I don't know if there's another option here because right now we're pushing time. We're closing in on what should be the start of the season, and you have some teams preparing and some teams are sitting home thinking we're not going to play this year. This is terrible.
Yeah, and the reason I keep saying that they might not play at all is because we have no idea what these next few months are going to be. We have no idea if this is going to carry into 2021. So if we're in the same situation we are right now, and they're not playing in the fall, well, they're not going to play in the spring either because we're going to be in the same situation. And then that's what I mean. Like, how does that affect the NFL draft in any way? What do you draft? What do you draft based on? Is it just this past year? Like, that to me is the most interesting part. If they don't continue to play, if they don't have this season at all, how does that affect the NFL? How does that affect these players? Do they allow these players to come back if they want? If they graduate, do they allow them to come back on scholarships? Like it's a mess, but I mean, no one saw this coming. It's just something they have to try to figure out the best way that they could.
And while they're trying to figure it out, we also have to take into consideration this is going to be a big draft for these NFL teams because they're going to be wild cards. If you don't get a chance to scout these guys and see film and you're going off of what they did in their previous season, and yeah, you can Zoom and whatnot with people, but you're not getting a sense of what you're truly getting. And I think that this year more than ever, you're going to see teams relying on these guys like Mel Kiper, Todd McShay, people who are paid a lot of money to evaluate these players because they know the ins and outs of these guys. And in the same token, say you have a season, right? Let's use the ACC as an example because they're the team off the top of my head, the conference off my head. Say North Carolina, they're going into their season, whatnot. They're heading into that Notre Dame game undefeated late in the year. But Sam Howell gets the virus. You know, it's a whole mess that could happen, and you're not in a bubble like the NHL and the NBA where you're isolated from everybody. You're going and you're having contact. You're still going to class. And a lot of the athletes are making that good point. You know, it's okay for me to go to class, but I can't compete, and vice versa. You know, there's some schools that are saying we're just going to do remote. So you're telling me that it's okay to hit somebody and tackle somebody and drool all over, sweat all over somebody, but I can't go into a classroom? It just doesn't add up, and there's so many dimensions to this, but it just seems like the NCAA doesn't want to make a decision that's going to make everybody mad at them or not happy with them because they're afraid of the repercussions of it.
Right. You mentioned Mel Kiper and Todd McShay. Listen, if the teams and the organizations in the NFL, if they need to rely on those guys, it's going to be a rough year because they're wrong every single year. I had to throw that in there. But, I mean, listen, you make a lot of good points. It's true. Like, if these players can go to class or can't go to class, to me that's equally the same as playing on the field and not playing on the field. You're still around people. Whether you're making contact or not, you're still around people. But I think the NCAA is running into the same situation that our country is running into. There are things we're allowed to do, there's things we're not allowed to do. And then you try to match it up with something else and you question, why can't we do this but if we can do this? So it's just, like I keep saying it, it's just a mess that they got to figure out. And I feel bad because it's practically impossible to figure out. No one's going to be happy. Not everyone's going to be happy with the decision that they make. I mean, Jim Harbaugh is a good example of it. The Big Ten's not playing, but Jim Harbaugh wanted to play. So did Iowa and Nebraska because they had a vote. It was 12-2. 12 teams voted against playing, and then the two teams, Iowa and Nebraska, voted that they wanted to play. Unfortunately, they're not going to be playing until the spring.
If we get to the spring, you never know. And it's amazing to think, like, you go around, and we're both from Jersey. We've made that well known. You see these people on the beach. They're not social distancing. You have people in bars, outdoor bars, outdoor dining, you name it, these people are all over the place. You mean to tell me that these college athletes aren't going to go to parties if there's a party? You mean to tell me that they're not going to hang out with their friends that are with a group of 50? That they're not going to isolate and take care of themselves? The McCourtys, I bring them up every week because they make good points, and they're in the NFL. You can control what you do, but how do you control what your teammate does? And we're going to talk about that in a little bit because that's a whole other situation in Major League Baseball that's come out. But it's like you can't control others. You can't control the virus. And there's so many questions that are going on with this. And I just feel like there's no resolution to it. And I honestly, I don't know about you, but I don't know the right answer to this. Yeah, the spring sounds great, but are you going to play in the spring and then proceed to play again in the fall? Like, I don't know how that's going to work.
That's what I'm saying. It's a mess. And I mentioned that earlier. This is going to change everything for them. Like, it's going to, if you're playing in the spring, that means it's a short amount of time to get back to normal and get going in August. Because they really do start at the end of August, most of the teams, that first week into September. So how does that throw you off there? There's not much preparation. Also, another big point we didn't even mention, but it just hit me now. If there's going to be no high school sports, how are you recruiting for your school? That's another big question. Like, because these scouts scout these high school players, and they bring them into their school. I know most of these players have either committed by now or they still have offers, and that's how it works. But listen, there are some guys who get offers their senior years, and they go places, and they turn into important players on those teams. So it just changes everything. This goes from high school, I feel, the scouting part of it, into college. It affects your season into next year of college, and then it affects how the NFL is going to run with their draft and how they prep for the following season.
Yeah, that's a really valid point there with the high school. And I'm a high school coach. I coach 3 sports. And having that question as to whether you're going to have a season or not, it's mentally grueling because you want to be on the court or you want to be on the field. And your athletes want to be on the field. And they want to do everything they can to make that happen. But you just simply can't control it. You don't know what's going to happen. And luckily, most seniors are either A, recruited well by this point, or B, have committed already. It's the juniors and the sophomores that you feel for because this is a big year for them. You know, you could probably name 10 to 15 juniors just in Bergen County alone, as we're talking about the New Jersey area, that are very good prospects that might not get that look because of the fact they don't have a season or a shortened season in the spring, and it may be too late for them. This is life-altering for everybody involved, and nobody predicted a pandemic. So this is all new as we go along, and it's going to be interesting to see how not only college level and the NFL play out, but also, like you said, high school, because that's an important step. These college athletes start off at a high school level. They get their reps through their school. You know, it's a big part of them. So it's an interesting take on that one.
And think about the seniors in college, those guys who have their last shot of making the pros, or getting drafted, or picked up as an undrafted free agent. I mean, if your season's messed up or you don't have a season at all, then that dream, that opportunity could be gone. And it's just an unfortunate situation. So you got to feel for them all. And talking about high school, I felt for a lot of the seniors going into their final, year of spring sports. They weren't able to do that because that's a great experience. So the whole situation is unfortunate and something we're all going through, but it'll be over eventually. I don't know when, but it'll be over at some point, hopefully.
You predicted it, and hopefully it's true. You just wish that you could click your fingers, snap your fingers, and get rid of it, because everybody's being affected by it, and everybody's being affected in different ways, whether you've lost somebody, whether you've lost a key moment in your life, or these kids who just want to be back in school, or like myself, I'm a teacher. I want to be back in a building. I miss going every day. I miss that normal routine. So, hopefully we get over it soon in terms of the coronavirus and everything gets back to somewhat normal. Now, something that kind of seems normal is the NBA. And they're in the NBA bubble, and I give them a lot of credit. This has been going really well. And we've talked about it a lot. I think me and you are both really locked into it. But we're getting closer to our final playoff seeding. So before we get into some interesting players that we want to get into tonight, I figured let's look at the first round matchups that we have currently. And mind you, we're at 8:30 on the East Coast right now. At 9 o'clock, Portland plays Brooklyn. That's going to determine the final 2 playoff spots, but we'll tell you more about that. Let's start with the East. You have the 1-seeded Bucks taking on the 8-seeded Magic. The Raptors as the 2 seed taking on your Brooklyn Nets, who are the 7 seed. The 3rd seed Boston Celtics are playing the 6 seed Philadelphia Sixers. They'll be without Ben Simmons in that one, it looks like. And then the 4 seed Miami and the number 5 seed Indiana. Now, out of those games or seeds, what matchup stands out to you the most?
That's tough. I mean, I think Milwaukee should breeze through the Orlando series. As much as I'm a Nets fan, I have to be realistic and say that Toronto's probably. I don't know if they'll breeze through them because Brooklyn's actually surprisingly been playing pretty well. But I think Toronto wins that one. If the Sixers without Ben Simmons is tough. That's a huge loss for them. So I would have to go Miami, Indiana. What do you think?
I agree with you there. First of all, you have the Butler versus T.J. Warren situation. That's something to keep an eye on. Warren, one of those guys we've talked about having a really good experience in the bubble. Can he help Indiana get over the hump? And I think if you're looking at upset, you got to look at that matchup because Indiana can compete with Miami. That might go the distance in a series. I don't know if they pull it off, but that could definitely go. If Philadelphia has Simmons, you can make the case that that's a really good matchup with Boston, but Boston's got a lot of star power. I think they're going to take care of them. And then, like you said, Brooklyn's been playing hard. They're fun to watch because Vaughn's got them playing. They're tough. They're gritty. You probably don't know half the guys on the floor, but unless you're a real fan. But they play night in and night out. They give it their all. But Toronto's playoff experience, I think, holds them up and moves them on. And then Milwaukee, you expect them to slap Orlando in that series.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. If Ben Simmons was healthy, that Boston-Philly series is by far the best one. I think it blows by Indiana and Miami. Now, I think Indiana-Miami is going to be a good series. I also agree. I think it could go the distance because they're extremely equal, in my opinion. But I don't give either team much of a chance of going much further after that. But I will say, let's say Philadelphia moves on or they don't. Let's say Boston does. Regardless, I think the second round of matchups, that semifinals round, is going to be great. Because if you have Milwaukee and Toronto moving on, that's big. Either Indiana or Miami, doesn't matter. Like we just mentioned, they're pretty much the same. And then Philadelphia with Ben Simmons or Boston, they're going to compete well. So the NBA's been, fans at least, have been waiting for this for a long time. To have it like an equal playing field in the playoffs. We have absolutely no idea who can make the finals, and that's what you want in sports. The NBA for too long has been predictable. So regardless of who gets in, I think everyone should look forward to it. Because guess what? If Orlando and Brooklyn shockingly win, why shouldn't you look at them? It's like a team moving on in March Madness. Like, they beat that team, so why can't they continue to move on? So regardless, as a fan, I think it's a win-win, whether my Brooklyn Nets move on or not, which I'm expecting them not to. For this year. Next year, watch out, but this year, not so much.
Now, let me ask you. If the Brooklyn Nets pull off an upset in the first round, what will your reaction be? Will you jump in excitement? Like, tell me, what would go through your mindset as the final buzzer hits in that contest where the Nets move on, if it does happen?
You got to extend the coach. It's a hell of a job on the coaching staff. But listen, you know what? I'm happy the Nets, as a fan, I should be happy regardless, but I'm also happy that they made the playoffs last year. They made the playoffs this year. Because even if these guys aren't going to be key contributors to the team next year, they're still getting playoff experience. And then all your stars come back next year. Your coach is getting playoff experience. So to me, it's a win-win. No one's expecting you to move on. Just go out there and play and get the experience, and continue to improve. Basketball is all repetition. So listen, I'm happy. And the further we go into the playoffs, the better it is for next year because December's right around the corner once this season ends.
You got that right. Now, do you extend Vaughn if they win the series, or do you extend Vaughn? Is there a parameter as to giving him the full-time gig for you? Like, say they win 2 games in the series. Is that enough for him to be the full-time coach?
I mean, that's tough. That's a tough decision. That definitely is a decision that the ownership's going to have to take Um, like they're going to have to take into strong consideration because he has done a nice job, and if he continues to go further, that means he's done even better than he is right now. So, listen, if he's doing well with those guys, why wouldn't he do well with guys like KD, Kyrie? I know Kyrie is like a cancer to a team. He doesn't get along well with coaches, but they're talented. So I don't know if you extend him that way, but I think maybe bring him back for next year. I don't know if that would technically be an extension, but I mean that's my opinion on it.
Kind of like a one prove it type
like
of deal.
prove it. Yeah,
That
exactly.
makes a lot of sense. I like to hear your opinion on it because you're a Nets fan. So you having that insight is better than me.
Well,
Personally, the way they play in the bubble, I would strongly consider him for the head coaching job. First of all, who's out there that really catches your eye?
no one, and they're playing hard. But I think you have to take into consideration who else is on the market too. Because we talked about the Knicks getting Thibodeau. He was definitely, in my opinion, the best guy on the market. So do you want to just give on that one more year? Or do you go and look to see who else is out there? If they're playing well, if they're playing hard, to me, it kind of makes it an easier decision. If they came in and pooped the bed on this one and didn't play well in the bubble, I'd say, okay, let's look around. But they're really not playing bad. And if they beat Toronto, the defending champs, whether they have Kawhi Leonard or not, they're a very talented team. So that says a lot.
Like we said last show, and I think the blueprint is here. I don't know if Vaughn would be good with the superstars, but if you bring in Carmelo Anthony and kind of keep the roster similar, they could compete in the East next year. There's no doubt about it. If they're healthy, that's a competing team.
If the Nets were completely healthy right now, they would not be a 7 seed at all. No way. And we were just talking about how it's an equal playing field. That Eastern Conference just got even tougher. Like, I'm talking, they're legitimate title contenders in the Eastern Conference. They really are. And who's to say Giannis eventually leaves Milwaukee? Who's the best team in the East? You have KD. When you have superstars like that, you're automatically a title contender. You just are.
Yeah, without a doubt. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. My eyes will definitely be on the Nets. I'm hoping they do well, make it a series at least, and we'll see how it goes from there. But let's jump into the West. Now, as we mentioned, the Lakers don't know who they're playing yet. We're going to have a play-in game for that 8 and 9 seed. We already know the Grizzlies will be there, even though they played terrible over the last 8 games. But it'll either be Portland or the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix Suns are 8 and 0 in the bubble. They have been playing unreal. They beat the Dallas Mavericks earlier today. Of course, Luka only played 18 minutes, but you got to give credit to Devin Booker. Guys like Cam Johnson have really played well. And you just got to give them credit. I didn't consider them a playoff team when they got into the bubble. I thought they were too far out of it. But they played really well and put themselves in a spot where if the Nets help them out, they're going to be playing for that last spot.
Yeah. And we know how it goes. That last spot's going to kind of be up for grabs in a little play-in game. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But this is a big game tonight. In just about 20 minutes, I think that game gets kicked off, right? 9 a.m. or is it 9:30?
9 o'clock, I believe.
9 o'clock. And we have Portland in there. Yeah, Phoenix shocked everyone. 8 and 0, that's impressive. No one's done that. They obviously were practicing, doing something during this pandemic, which, you know what, if you have the opportunity to do that, they did it right. So, their hard work paid off. But if Portland wins, and Portland's pretty much in it. But I know we're going to talk about Portland because there's a guy on that team who's stepped up big time. And there's a lot of beef going on in the NBA. So if you want to jump into Damian Lillard.
Listen, Portland's been one of the better teams in the NBA since the restart. They're 5-2 going into tonight's contest against the Nets. And Damian Lillard, like you mentioned, is a big part of that. He is averaging 37 points, just under 10 assists a game. Some of his big games included 61 against Dallas on August 11th. I thought it was cool. Adidas dropped his shoe prices to $61. So I don't know how long that lasted, but I thought that was a cool little feature that they did for him. 51 against Philly, 45 points, 12 assists against Denver. Had another 30-point game and had 16 assists against Boston. That was a game where they trailed. I think they were down 17, and they were able to come back. Lillard's been impressive. What's your take on him?
I mean, I think Lillard's one of the most underrated players in the league, and I felt that way for a long time now. I mean, the guy he's always playing consistently well, right? And he's clutch. That's the one thing that stands out for me is he's clutch. He always steps up. He's loyal. He is loyal to Portland. Like he's all about trying to bring them a championship. I'm not quite sure he could do that. Portland to me never seems like a legitimate title contender. It might be a playoff contender, but we know what he's done in his career. He weirdly enough has two times. Well, I wouldn't say that. I worded that badly, but he's sent a team home in the playoffs on a buzzer beater. That's impressive. That you're clutch. Like we're not just talking about beating a team, but I'm talking about sending them home, ending a series. I don't know anyone else who's done that. He's an all-star. He was a rookie of the year back in 2012. So this is a guy who doesn't get the credit that I feel he deserves. What's your take on him? I think he's playing lights out, and he's the reason they jumped into the 8th seed. And he also is a huge reason why they got to the Western Conference Finals last year. So this is a guy that just doesn't get talked about, but he's always been there. And I'm happy for him that he's stepping up and carrying this team.
I was watching ESPN the other day, and I don't know who said it, so I don't want to quote the wrong person, but what they said I have to agree with. If you look at the NBA right now, there is not a player who means more to their organization and their community than what Damian Lillard does. Very big in the Portland community, and he's a guy that I consider him to be one of the most old-school type of players that we have in today's game. And I mean that in the best way because he's not running out of Portland. And what we're going to talk about, his little beef with Paul George and Patrick Beverley, he made that very clear. And I'll jump into that a little bit. Lillard missed 2 free throws against the Clippers, lost that game ultimately, and George and Beverley kind of mocked him. They kind of had some more beef after the game, and by beef I mean some drama, and it got to the point where both families got involved. Since then, it seems like they've kind of cleared the air a little bit, but Damian Lillard basically came out and reminded Paul George, bro, I ended your season last year, and you ran to play with one of the best players in the league in L.A. You didn't stay. You keep running because you can't win. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying in Portland. I'm committed to Portland. And yeah, things could change. I thought Russell Westbrook would spend his whole career in OKC. But things change, things happen, and you know what? It is what it is. But to see a guy like him commit to an organization, like you said, like Portland, who really doesn't stand out and doesn't necessarily strike you as title contenders, but has that commitment to try his best to bring a winner to them, that to me says a lot about Damian Lillard and his character.
Exactly. And that's why I respect him so much. And I'm glad he's starting to get a little bit of the credit that he deserves because they aren't title contenders. And he's a guy who doesn't get the credit. You would think if you're not getting the credit and you have his talent and you're not on a title contender, you're running. You're running to a new city to get that credit, to be on a contender, to possibly win one day. And he's not doing that. He's committed and he's loyal to Portland. He made a few other comments. I don't remember exactly what he said, but the gist of it was that every time someone knocks him down, he gets back up and he keeps pushing forward. And it's true. And that's what it comes back to. I keep repeating myself, but it's about him not getting the credit that he deserves, not getting an all-star appearance, not getting voted into the all-star game. There's a lot that goes into it, but jumping into the beef that went on between him, Paul George, and Patrick Beverley, he didn't just mention that he knocked out Paul George, but he knocked out Patrick Beverley also years prior. Those were the 2 buzzer beaters that I was talking about. And then they kind of got into it, and I believe Paul George said that he'd be sending him home this year. But I think, personally, I think Damian Lillard kind of won that little, beef segment, or however you want to put it, because he told them straight up, he's not going anywhere. You guys are running, and I've already sent you guys home. So, to me, you know what? Like I said, I'm happy Damian Lillard's doing what he's doing. I don't expect them to make a run. They're not going to beat LA in that first round, but he's carrying that team, and for him, that's what matters. He obviously wants to win for his team, but I think the credit-wise, it's good because he's put the team on his back, as he always does.
Now, you're a LeBron guy, and I want to ask you this question, but if I'm looking at it from a Lakers standpoint, out of the 3 teams that I could possibly play in the first round, Portland to me would be the one that I least want to play. I don't know about you, but I think that Portland, their guard play alone is a mismatch for the Lakers because, yeah, the Lakers have LeBron and Davis, but if you look at McCollum and Lillard, and then you add a guy like Gary Trent in there, they have a lot of upside out of the backcourt, and that might be a big advantage in that series.
Well, I think Portland's just a good team in general, and I think they're a team with playoff experience because they were in the playoffs last year. They, once again, part of Damian Lillard carrying them. They were not supposed to be in the Western Conference Finals last year, like at all. They weren't supposed to be there. You know, they were just a team in the playoffs. They weren't serious contenders, as we keep saying. So they have playoff experience. I think they have an extremely talented roster. So if I'm LA, yeah, Portland's the team I least want to see. You know, I don't know between Memphis and Phoenix. To me, they're equally the same. They both have young talent. I think they're a few years away. If they're, you know, somewhat close, it's hard to say with those teams. So they continue to get draft picks, but they never really make those jumps. But Portland's a team I don't want to see. And in about 3 hours from now, we're gonna know if they're gonna be seeing them. So it's interesting. Like today was a big day in the NBA. This was the most important day of the season, resuming the season, because the playoff, the seeding might not be there, but we're gonna know who's in and who's out by the end of tonight.
Oh, absolutely. And if I had to rank them, I would want to see Memphis first. They have Jackson out. The Suns, because they're hot. They're the hottest team in the league right now. And then you have to rank Portland last because of what they bring to the table. And they dealt with injuries. They're not an 8 seed. They're not a 9 seed. They're more of a middle-of-the-pack type of team. But as we look at the playoff teams before we move on, Lakers play that to be determined. The Clippers play Dallas. I like that series. I don't know if Dallas pulls it off, but I like Luka. I think that he'll make it interesting to watch just because he's Luka. Then you have Denver and Utah in the 3-6, and Oklahoma City and Houston Rockets at the 4-5. What matchup stands out to you the most here? Where do you see a possible upset or an intriguing series?
That's interesting. I think Lakers knock out whoever they play. I do really like the Clippers-Mavericks matchup, but because I love Luka. And obviously the Clippers are the real deal, but I don't think the Mavericks are there yet. I think they're a good, young, talented team, but they're not there yet. They're not going to make that push. I personally don't think they're getting through with the Clippers. I do like Denver, Utah. I feel like they match up really well. In my opinion, I've never been too big on them, but I think they're both sleepers. So I really like that matchup. I think that could be a good one. But Houston, OKC is too, because I'm a big Westbrook guy. You got Westbrook and Harden. And we know the trade that happened with Westbrook and CP3, so that's interesting. I think if there's going to be any sleeper or upset, it'd probably be not a huge upset, not saying they'd advance much further, but maybe OKC beating Houston. And the reason for that is Houston, to me, just a part of me sees them as choke artists. You know, like every year they're in the playoffs, and they could just never get over that hump. And I love Westbrook. But I'm not really a big fan of this small ball. I think without having a big man, I don't see you going very far. Then again, they're the team I could see sliding in. And we mentioned that a few episodes ago when we spoke about the NBA returning to play and our little predictions about that. I said Houston's that team I could see getting knocked out early, but they're also that team that could sneak in and maybe make the Western Conference Finals. So what do you think?
I love that OKC Houston series. You know I followed OKC for a very long time since I'm a Durant fan. When they broke that team up with George and Westbrook last year, it was frustrating, and I'm thinking, you know, you're going to go through a rebuild. It is what it is, but you got to give Sam Presti a lot of credit. What he was able to bring back, and Chris Paul has been nothing but a godsend to that team. The OKC is by far and easily the most surprising team in the NBA this year, the way that they came together and they built upon what they have. And they got to thank Houston. Houston gave them a lot of picks to build on for the future, so, you know, they're in a good spot. I think opposite of what you said. You said that you think OKC was more of an upset over Houston. I think Houston without Westbrook for the first couple of games, if they're able to beat OKC, that's an upset to me. I think that the dynamic of Westbrook and Harden is a better duo than what anything OKC has. But without Westbrook, I think it gets a little bit tricky. And then again, I like that Dallas series. I'll be watching it because, number one, I like Leonard and George. I think I want to see how far they could go. But Luka Doncic is much must-see TV. That guy's unbelievable.
Yeah, my thing with OKC, even Houston without Westbrook, like OKC to me just shouldn't be there, right? They just had a nice season, but they're not supposed to be there. So for me, as a basketball fan and how I've been watching them, they're like, it's crazy to say, but I put them lower than Dallas. Like, I know they obviously have played better. Like, that's why they're seated higher, but they're just not supposed to be there. Like, they're the biggest sleeper to me. So them advancing in any way, it doesn't matter who they're playing, to me is that upset. Like, that's how I'm trying to come across at OKC. But they have a young, talented roster, and they're in a great position because they have a ton of draft picks too. So they really played it well. Like, I would have never expected them to be in the playoffs. They're by far the most surprising team to me.
I thought they were going to be picking number 1 in this upcoming draft. I really thought so, but credit to them, they've done a really nice job. Now, before we jump off of the NBA topic, do you want to change your finals prediction, or are you sticking with what we said a couple of shows ago?
I'm sticking with it. I don't think I have a reason to change it right now. As a LeBron fan, I am hoping that he gets to the finals, and I think Milwaukee's the best team in the East. I do, and yeah, I'm not going to change it. What about your predictions?
I'm going to stick to it. I don't want to change it. I feel confident with it. I think Kawhi and George are going to lead the Clippers past LeBron. It's going to hurt his legacy a little bit more that he's not going to beat Jordan. It is what it is. And again, you have Milwaukee in the East. I don't think anybody tops them. So it'll be interesting to watch. It's going to be fun to watch. There's a lot of exciting matchups in that first round and in that play-in game. Now, let's jump into baseball really quick. The Cleveland Indians are a mess. And what I mean by that is 2 of their starting pitchers, Zach Plesac and Mike Clevenger, were found leaving the team and breaking protocol. So they were basically out. They were, whatever they were doing. But again, it's a situation where you forget that their teammate, Carlos Carrasco, just dealt with leukemia. So we go back to the NCAA having trouble with the coronavirus and figuring out what to do. And then you have these guys aimlessly going out, not worried about anybody else, and risking the lives of those around them. Now, we have a comment, and this is from Adam Pluko. Pluko is the starting pitcher for the Indians, and when he was asked about this situation, he replied, "They," meaning Clevenger and Plesac, "hurt us bad. They lied to us. They sat here in front of you guys and publicly said things that they didn't follow through on. It's going to be up to them to fix everything. It really is. I'll let them sit here and tell you how they're going to earn their trust back. I don't need to put words in their mouths. The term that I continue to hear, and excuse my language, is grown beep man." I don't want to say the word that he used. So these grown beep men can sit here and tell you guys what happened and tell you guys what they're going to do to fix it. I don't need to do that for them. What's your take on the whole situation with Clevenger and Plesac? And what do you think about Pluko's comments? Because Pluko was a guy that filled in one of the voids in the starting rotation when these guys were sent in quarantine.
I'm in agreement with what he said, and I think Clevenger, well, both of them. The thing is, Clevenger got away with it for a little bit. He didn't get picked up at first because what's the other guy's name? I forget his name.
Zach Plesac. If you watch, if anybody needs to know who Zach Plesac is, if you watch MLB Network, his uncle is Dan Plesac. He used to pitch for the Brewers.
So Plesac actually was sent home. He had to drive home to Cleveland after they caught him. Clevenger took the ride on the plane with the team because they hadn't known yet about them going out. So overall, I think they were both irresponsible with everything going on right now. Like, there's protocol for a reason. And we see how some of these team seasons are being suspended. Players are testing positive for COVID and you're going out. It just doesn't add up to me. And the funny thing is, Plesac came out before the start of the season and said, I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something along the lines of, going out to bars and drinking really isn't that important to us. So you're lying through your teeth again. But listen, it was irresponsible on their part, and now they actually were sent home for 72 hours, and they needed to get tested each day. And having a guy like Carlos Carrasco, cancer survivor, and you're I don't know. You're just putting everyone at risk there. It was irresponsible of them, and for them to lie to the team, I think they have to earn their teammates' trust back.
We just sat here and watched what happened with the Miami Marlins. And we sat here and we continue to watch what's continuing with the St. Louis Cardinals. And then you have these two guys, and Plesac's another one, and you mentioned his comments about, bars and that aren't my thing and our thing, whatever. But how irresponsible are you, knowing what's going on and wanting to play the game and having everybody around you and teammates and coaches and people that are at high risk, and you're selfishly doing something like that? I don't know if that's forgivable at this point. Now, I don't know how Cleveland's going to handle this, because let's face facts. When you're trying to win, you're going to bring back your guys. Clevenger's going to be back. He's one of their aces. They're going to need him. Plesac's going to get innings eventually. But I don't know how I would handle this as a club. First of all, I wouldn't want them near the club. I think that if they were irresponsible to do it once, they were irresponsible to do it again. But in the same token, what do you do with them? There's no, timeout corner that Major League Baseball made, oh, you broke protocol, we could put you on this list. It's either you put them on the injured list, or in some cases, I don't know what their status is in terms of options. If you can't option them, they go to waivers and somebody's going to pick them up. So there's no clear answer. And I think that Major League Baseball should really set something like, if you break protocol, you're suspended for this amount of games without pay. That's it. Clear, concise, because that's the only way you're going to keep these guys from doing this, is because they're going to lose money.
Yeah, I agree with that. There needs to be some type of consequences when it comes to this, because your season was almost put to a halt with the whole Miami situation, and now you have these players shortly afterwards going out and doing what they're doing. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's irresponsible. They clearly don't care enough. And you know what? A small incident like that can completely throw off the entire season. What if Cleveland then, had a breakout and they were unable to play? Then it affects the next team. Now all these games are postponed. They have to do double headers. You're trying to fit in 55 games in 50 days, and it's a mess. So the MLB should have stepped in. But you know what? There should have been a protocol for that from the start. There should have been consequences set out, just like the NBA is doing. If you leave, you're going home for 10 days or whatever it is, 14 days. That's how it should have been. They're saying, oh, well, he needs to go home for 72 hours and needs to be tested each day. That's not enough to me. He may go out again and say, hey, I'll be home for the next 3 days. I'll be all right.
I agree with you. I think that these two guys should be quarantined for 2 weeks, just like anybody else would be. If you're saying that there's a possibility they were exposed, you don't know where they were, or what they were doing, or who they were around. They were exposed. I quarantined them for 14 days. They broke protocol, and that's it. I think this was a bad move by them. I think it was a dumb move by them. Do I think they regret it? Yeah. Do I think they care? I don't know. When you're at that age and you want to do what you want to do, you don't want to be subject to sticking around and doing what your boss is telling you to do. You're off the clock. So I don't agree with it. I don't like how it's handled. I don't think that 72 hours away from the team is worth it. And I think that they're going to have a lot of grief from their teammates, because if one of them ends up getting it, you're going to blame Clevenger and Plesac for it. It's a matter of if it happens, and if it does and it spreads, it's going to look really bad on the Indians organization.
Yeah, and I'm not – the comment I'm about to make right now, I'm not saying that Clevenger should be blamed more than Plesac, but Clevenger's a bigger piece to that team than Plesac is. And for him to be one of their top, arms, to do that, you're not only in the wrong for putting everyone else at risk, but you're in the wrong with the fact that you're not even going to be there now. So if they really do extend it, if they say, hey, you know what, we're going to punish you, we're going to suspend you, you're hurting the team, because that team needs you. It's like the Yankees losing one of their top arms. It hurts the team, and you're in a shortened season. Every game means something. And they're not a team that has that much talent. So they really do need every game and every piece of talent to make a run. So, what the organization is, their teammates, they have to be upset with them. And if I was players around the league, I'd be a little annoyed about it too, because this could have affected your entire season. All these guys are putting in the work, playing day in and day out, and you have and taking it serious, making the sacrifices to stay home and not see their families and not see their friends and not see their girlfriends. And you have these other guys who are going out to bars or strip clubs or restaurants because they don't care, and that's a problem.
It's a huge problem, but hopefully it doesn't happen again and we don't have any more outbreaks throughout Major League Baseball or any of the big name sports. Now, as we kind of wrap up today's show, we want to get into hockey a little bit. We talked about it last week, but we have the official Stanley Cup playoff seedings, and here they are. If you look at them, here's your bracket. The Golden Knights, who, from what I understand, while we were on the air tonight, are actually in a 3 overtime contest. I don't know if that's over. I don't know what the deal is with that, but or they were tied at 3 going into overtime. Let me correct that. So there's a lot of interesting things here in regards to the Stanley Cup Finals. I haven't watched any of it. Have you been able to catch any of the action so far? I know it's early on in the playoffs.
No, so I was watching the qualifiers, but I haven't been able to catch any games in the actual playoffs yet, but I have been following it on my phone and been getting a notification. So I'm fairly up to date on everything, but I haven't been able to sit down and really catch a game yet.
I'm in the same boat. You know how it is when it's Yankee season. When the Yankees are on, everything else kind of goes to the wayside. And, as you guys know, I write for a Yankee website. So if anything does happen, you got to be up on it, and you can't miss anything. And with the other podcast I run, so it's kind of difficult. But I am keeping up with it, hoping the Islanders could beat the Capitals. I'm not a big Ovechkin fan, never was. It would be nice to see them knock him out. And then you didn't look around the league. I think the main thing that everybody's looking for is competitive series. I don't know if there's a team out there that everybody's rooting for. Usually there's that one team that stands out, but I'm just looking for competitiveness. That's what I look for in hockey because I love the intensity of it. So if we go to a full series for most of these, then I'll be a happy camper.
Yeah, you know what? In hockey, game sevens are a lot more common than I feel in other sports, especially in the playoffs, because it is very competitive. And for the most part, it is an equal playing field. And that's what you want. So that's why I love hockey, the playoffs. I always follow it throughout the season, but I'm not on top of it like other sports. I rarely just sit down and catch a hockey game. But in the playoffs, it doesn't really matter who's playing to me. If I'm home and hockey's on, the playoffs are on, I'm watching it because I love the nonstop play. I love the physicality. And like I mentioned before, the fact that it is an equal playing field, it's competitive. You just have no idea who's going to win each year. Even if a team's a 1 seed, it doesn't matter. The Devils, I remember we made the Stanley Cup a few years back as a 6 seed. We were taking on an 8 seed in the Kings. How unpredictable is that? It's 2 of the worst teams that are left in the playoffs, and they both made the Stanley Cup. So that's what's great about it. But there are some nice series here. And for local people, I know it's more common to be a Devils fan or a Rangers fan, but the Islanders are in there. And listen, if they beat the Capitals, that's big. Ovechkin's big time, and the Capitals won the Stanley Cup just 2 years ago. So, but I'm taking a look at some of the other ones. Golden Knights, Blackhawks. To me, I know it's a 1 versus 8, but that's a good series. And I'm a Stars fan. I really like a guy like Tyler Seguin. So that's actually the team I'm rooting for. I don't know if they're gonna make a deep run, but low key, that's the team I'm rooting for right now.
So if you're watching, Kyle's rooting for the Stars here. This is his team for the postseason run, but. As we get into our final topic of today's show, I want to go back to the screen because I want you to get your credit where credit's due. Last week, we talked about the NHL. We talked about the Rangers. And I sat here and I said, you know what? It was a waste of time for them to come here. It was a waste of time for them to show up. They looked like garbage. But you assured me that it wasn't a waste of time. Why? Because the Rangers had a 12.5% chance of still landing the number 1 overall pick. They were able to still have that chance and compete in the bubble, even though they played terribly. And what happened? The ping pong ball fell in their favor. They will have the number 1 pick in the upcoming NHL draft. Pretty nice if you're a Rangers fan.
Oh, yeah. I said it. Listen, I had no idea they were going to get the first pick, but I had to mention it because I was like, okay, 12.5% chance. If you look at the NBA lottery, I know 12.5% chance, there's a possibility. Right? And I think for them to have the opportunity to play in the qualifiers, but then also have an opportunity to get the first pick, that's a win-win. You have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. I know it wasn't very likely, and that goes to show what actually happened, but they had an opportunity, and their fans got an opportunity to see them play 3 more games. Now you get the first pick in the draft. I have a few friends who are Rangers fans. They were ecstatic about it. So I would be too. I remember the Devils had the first pick I believe it was 2 years ago. It's pretty cool. It's common in hockey for the ball to roll around a little bit, more than in the NBA, but that's big for the Rangers. And I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's something with an L, Lafreniere or something like that. But there's a big-time prospect that's supposed to be coming up, and looks like he's going to be landed in New York. So I'm a Devils fan, but congratulations to all those Rangers fans out there.
I was just going to ask you to say this guy's name because I don't know how to say his name. Alexis Lafreniere? Lafreniere? I don't know how to say his name.
You said it as good as I did.
Me and you are in the same boat here. We both don't know how to pronounce this kid's name. If anybody wants to help us, leave us a comment. But
I know who's going to know how to pronounce the name. The commissioner with the first pick.
Yeah, that's when I'll know how to say his name. As soon as he makes the announcement, I'll know it. But he's 6'1". He's 18 years old. Put up 112 points, 35 goals, 77 assists in 52 games for his team in the 2019-2020 season. So looks like the Rangers are going to get a good one. And like you said, congrats to them. Having the first pick is great. The lucky ping pong ball fell their way, and it is what it is. Let's see how this kid turns out. 18 years old, there's a lot of hype around his future. Now, as we wrap up today's show, what's your final thoughts?
Before my final thoughts, I just want to mention also, it's big to have the first pick in hockey too, because if you look at the past, if you look at the history, most of those guys pan out. Most of the guys taken with the first pick are the big names that are left in the league. So that's big. But final thoughts, I say it every week, I enjoy talking sports with you. I enjoy this whole jumping from sport to sport thing because there's so much more to cover, and it gives, I think, the viewers an opportunity where, yeah, maybe you're not the biggest basketball fan, but you like baseball. We're going to cover baseball at some point in the show. It's crazy to see how the show has changed over the course of time because we were talking about debatable topics at first. There was no live sports. Now we've jumped into just how do I put it? Regardless, they're still debatable topics. They all are debatable topics because I give my opinion, you give your opinion. But overall, we don't know what we're going to talk about next week. But that's what's great about this because something new happens every day. So.
Yeah, and their bet's as good as ours now. Like when we first started the show, you could have a lot of different ideas about what we're going to talk about, but everything changes daily. So we will definitely have a live show for you next week, Thursday night, 8 o'clock. As always, and we'll talk about live sports, and we'll debate it here. My final thought, first of all, I think you're going to become an NHL analyst on our brand here. I think that's just the title for you. It's coming. You focus on it a lot more than I do. I don't know, we might have to recruit some NHL analysts to go with you, but maybe we can make you like the professional NHL contributor here. Like that might be a good role for you. Like you're an NBA and NFL guy, but the NHL, you seem to be hitting with your points here.
Listen, you're putting a lot more pressure on me now. I'm going to have to really keep up on it. But, no, I mean, listen, I do enjoy the NHL. So I would like to talk about the NHL a lot more. And I think with the playoffs going on, there's going to be a lot to talk about. And as the playoffs progress, there's going to be even more to talk about. Because that's how it gets even more and more exciting. So,
yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun with that. My other final thought for the day, Mike Clevenger, Zach Plesac, be better. NCAA, figure out what you're doing, please, because I need to know. I need some kind of figuring out. And in the NBA, I hope that Portland beats the Nets tonight, even though I want to see the Suns get in. I think Portland gives the Lakers the best series in that Western Conference first-round matchup. And like I said before, we'll be back next Thursday night, 8 o'clock. Check out the website, DelahantyMedia.com. It's so easy for you to check out everything. You missed all of tonight's show. You missed part of tonight's show. You can check it all out, both YouTube and audio side. It's pretty cool. Go to the shop while you're at it. Thanks to Connor Siren and Alpha Design for all the help with the website. Again, DelahantyMedia.com. If you don't see it on the screen already, it's all there. Just make sure you get the spelling right. Check it out. And again, our social media feed is listed below. For Kyle Delahanty, I'm Nick Delahanty. That's going to wrap up the Let's Debate podcast for this evening. Thank you for tuning in and sticking with us through the early technical difficulties. Kyle, we made it.
We did. There were no problems. I'm shocked right now because we couldn't get through 5 minutes of it before the show. But, hey, listen, the technological gods hard to say that. The technological gods were with us, and hopefully they're with us next week too.
Absolutely. And until then, make sure you guys check us out, check out our show, and as always, talk sports with us. Until next week, we'll see you soon. Take care.